G'day from Australia. Before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm broadcasting. I'd also like to acknowledge elders past and present. My name's Ashley Davis. Welcome to my live stream. I'm continuing to live stream the development of my Kanban board extension for Visual Studio Code. This is the 5th session already, and I've got a fair way into it. In a moment, I'm going to show you how you can catch up on the previous sessions if that's what you want to do. While I'm working, I'm going to do my best to explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, but please feel free to ask questions. I will try and look at the chat this time and respond. My head gets really into the coding, so it is actually quite difficult to do that. Also, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is AshleyDavis75, and you can see it up in the top right-hand corner of my stream. If you want to follow along, you can get the code here at my GitHub, Ashley Davis, Taskboard VS Code extension. You can download the code or you can clone it. My suggestion is that if you want to kind of contribute, you can fork it and make your own changes and commit back to this project, which I'm moving ahead with. There's some instructions here for how to get this to run. Of course, this isn't all my own work. It's based on this repo here, which is a great example of how to create a React web page that runs as a web view in Visual Studio Code. I'm also planning to build on React Trello, which is this fantastic implementation of a Kanban board, a Trello-style Kanban board in React. If you'd like to catch up on the previous sessions, please see my YouTube channel, The Data Wrangler. Click on playlists and you'll find the Coding Livestream Taskboard playlist. It's my first playlist. And you can see, I haven't added Taskboard, the 4th session here. I've got to remember to do that. But I have uploaded the video, so the video is there. I just haven't yet added it to this playlist. So we're up to the 5th session, and you've got 4 that you can catch up on before here to find out my motivations for the project, the way I'm tackling it, and how I configured it, how I got started, where it comes from, all that good stuff. Now, in the last session, if you watched the last session, you'll know that I left myself with a failing test to fix in this session. So I'm just going to run that test now, npm test. I'm using Jest for testing TypeScript code here. Now this should give me my failing test from last time. So you can see I've got a bunch of successful tests that I've already written, and this is the test that I set up last session that I was going to implement in this session. So can load a task. So test-driven development is really good for being able to basically drop a project and pick it up again. So I'm building this Visual Studio Code extension, but I'm doing it in real time while I'm live streaming, and I'm only doing that in small chunks every week. So every Friday, basically, I'm doing a bit of coding, a bit of live streaming, and then I'm dropping it for a week, and I'm coming back to it. And one way that you can easily drop a project and come back to it and just get straight back into it is leave yourself a broken test. So then you know exactly what you're gonna do starting out in the next session. I've got to fix this test. Of course, there's lots of other great benefits to test-driven development. Please see the 4th session, the session before this one, and I'll give you a list of those. So I'm just going to open Visual Studio Code from this directory to open my project. You can see here in converter.ts I've got the function that I'm testing, which is converting a markdown abstract syntax tree to Kanban board data. If any of that sounds confusing, please watch the previous sessions. I don't really want to have to explain it all again. In this file here, I've got my tests. So I've got a test suite called converter. I've got a function that I created. If you remember last session, we refactored some of our tests, and I created this function here for creating test data. I've made use of that in a lot of tests. I'm going to make use of it hopefully in all the rest of my tests as well. And this is the test that we're currently working on, can load a task. Also, the function that we're building, so this function here, it started out very simple. It's growing more complicated. At every step of the way, I can prove that it works, because I've automated the testing of it. So I can rerun the tests again every time I make a change to this code to make sure that it still works. And this function is going to get a lot more complicated yet. In fact, I'll show you what it's going to look like. So this is the prototype version of the function. You can see it's pretty complicated. And the reason I'm doing test-driven development now is because this is just a prototype. There are lots of edge cases, probably errors and stuff in this code, and I'm working through the TDD to basically make sure that I can do that. And also, the real version of this function, it's going to be more complicated than the prototype. Actually, before we get into the testing, let's just have a quick look at the prototype, just so you know what we're aiming at. If you've seen the previous sessions, you'll have seen this. This is the prototype, so this is the Kanban board on the right here, running in Visual Studio Code. I can do editing of this thing, and you can see if you watch the left. So just watch over here. You can see that I'm actually editing a markdown file by editing this Kanban board. So this is the prototype. This is what I'm trying to build, and I'm working towards it now, like a actual proper long-term maintainable code. I'm using test-driven development to get there. I'm just going to close down this other Visual Studio Code that I don't need. I'll just organize these so they're next to each other. Now, I got set up for doing testing with live reload. So I have that set on the script test watch. So this is going to run my jest test, and every time I edit my code, it's going to reload the tests. So let's get orientated here. I've got a test, can load task. I've created some test data for it using my function here. Oh no, sorry. I've got my test data here that's collapsed. So I've got some hard-coded test data. We might refactor that later. In my list of tasks here in the abstract syntax tree, I have a list item, which is basically a task or a card, and the text in that, the title of it, is task. So I'm just going to collapse that again. So that's what we set up in the last session. I'm passing that into the function that I'm testing, so I'm passing in that test data. I'm getting a result. I expect one lane to come back. That's just a preliminary check. It's not really the core of this test. I'm pulling out that lane, and I'm checking that I have an array of cards under that lane in the Kanban board that has one single task, and it has ID of task and title of task. Now I've got to write the code to make this test pass. So I've set up what I expect the expectations to be, but the code to actually do that doesn't exist yet. I am going to have a quick look at my prototype to remember how this should actually work. So we're saying here for each task in the list, we're going to pull that task out of the list item and push it on the list of cards. Now this may seem like cheating. I'm going to hard code this to return one task, and if you remember back to the second or the third session, you remember I did this kind of thing back then as well. So this is going to seem like it's cheating, but as it comes together, you'll see why I do this. So I've got a single lane. Now what I would do in my prototype is I would enumerate the list of children, but I'm not going to do that. So what I want here is that next child. So the first child, it's like the heading. You can see here it's like the heading of the list. And the next child is the actual list of tasks itself. So I want something like this code here to pull that out. But I can really simplify this, right? Like, so I'm not testing that edge case yet, where there might not be a next child. So I really just want to simplify this. I've got my markdown AST, I've got that the children, yep, I've got the next child. Instead of calling this next child, I might call this list list root. So it's the root of all the the cards or the tasks that are going to be in the lane. So that's a better name for that. Again, it's going to seem crazy, but I've hard coded that. This is going to break a whole bunch of other tests, by the way, as well. So I probably will have to fix this the right way pretty quickly. But at the moment, my only aim is to get this task here, or this test here loading, can load a task. I've just got this one thing to focus on to get this test to pass. The simple naive kind of implementation I'm going to do is probably going to break every other test here, but that's okay. That's not what I'm aiming to do right at this moment. So what I'm aiming to do here is I've got my lane with my cards. There's an array there. You can see the array here is initialized already to an empty array. That was part of one of our previous tests. I'm going to push on that array a new task, and I think it's just got to have an ID and a title. And I'm literally, actually, I've gone too far. I don't even need to do that. So the simplest way that I can get that test to pass, I think, is just by doing this. I mean, this is why it seems like cheating, right? But that should get that test to pass. And if this was enough to pass all my other tests, job done. But no, I've got a whole bunch of failing tests. Okay, so I have got my test passing, can load a task. I kind of cheated to do that. Interestingly enough, my original test to load an empty board still passes, but I've got a bunch of failing tests because this is hard coded to return a task in places where it shouldn't return a task. So I'm going to quickly work around this by saying only if there's more than one child in the list will I add that task. Now this is still obviously going to seem like some sort of cheating. We're not done yet, but my prediction is this will get my other test to pass, and for some reason it hasn't. So I'm still in the same situation as I was before. Actually, this is going to be. I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Actually, this is where I actually need this list root, because it's this thing here that I want to say. If there's more than one children of that, then that means we have tasks, or at least one task. Let's see if that gets me on my passing tests. Woohoo! I've got a full passing test suite, and obviously I've cheated. So the way I kind of work around this and move on from this is the same as what I did before when I was loading a single column. When I did my first test here, can load a column, I hard coded that as well. But then I added another test, can load a column with different data, and I expected different data to come out. So at that point there, I can't hard code it anymore. So I'm kind of forcing myself to move forward, and I'm doing very, very simple granular steps here. So I'm going to call this, well, I call it another task. So I've duplicated my test. I'm gonna call this test can load a task with different data. I'll just collapse that test data. And this time I expect another task to come through. So this is adding a new test that is going to force me to fix my code. So I expect this one test will fail. This one new test, yep. So can load a task with different data is what's failing here. All the other tests are passing, so that's good that I haven't broken anything by doing that. Now I have to kind of unhard code this. So I'm still only working with one task here as well, so it is still going to kind of be hard coded. But I'm going to say like first task. Where did I go there? Hang on, I just lost where I was. There we go. First task is the first child. Hopefully this is going to bear out to be true for what I've actually put in the data. And I'm going to, in fact, I'm just going to check the data because I can't quite remember what I'm trying to do here. So it should be a list item, and it should have a child that's a paragraph, which has a child that's a text. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say first task text is the first task. We're gonna drill down to the children of that, and I think what we have to do is drill drill down to the children of that, and that gives us our text. And then we can pull out the value here. So the value is another task. And we're going to use that for both the ID and the title. We're gonna later on we're going to refactor this to have a proper ID. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Now I expect my new test to pass. Yep. So I'm making incremental changes here. You can see already this function is starting to grow in complexity. But any change I make to it now, I want to ultimately end up with a full suite of passing tests, and that way I know at least everything I've done in the past is gonna still continue to work. Now I'm going to continue doing what I did basically in the first set of tests when I could load a column, with different data, then I could load multiple columns. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write a test that I can, and I'm just going to duplicate one of the existing tests. I'm writing a test now that I can load multiple tasks. So this is going to force me to continue to flesh out that function in the way that it should be, to be fully general. Be good if I could spell, hey. Can load multiple tasks. So this time we're going to have multiple list items. We're just going to have two. So I'll duplicate that. So we've got one list item and two list items in our markdown abstract syntax tree. I'll call them task 1 and task 2. And then I'll collapse this. Don't worry, we're going to come back and refactor this data as well, just like I did refactoring in I think it was the last session. I'm not going to get time in this session to do the refactoring. I might even do that offline, seeing as I've already done that in a live streaming session. There's probably no point in kind of me showing that again. So I might actually do that between live streams and show you what that ends up in afterwards. So here what I'm expecting now is to have, I'm still expecting a single lane, but now I want to have multiple cards. So I'm going to say what I want to have back is 2 cards, and they're going to be like task 1 and task 2. So this new test can load multiple tasks. I predict that it's going to fail. It's very important when you're doing coding, I think TDD especially, to predict what's going to happen. So make a code change, predict what's going to happen. The tests are going to show you whether you were right or wrong, but it's a great way to build your experience. You can say, oh, I predicted that correctly, or oh, I got it wrong, but why did I get it wrong? Like that kind of thing, like asking those kind of questions to yourself is really going to help you grow in your own experience. So like I expected, my new test can load multiple tasks is failing, and so now I have to flesh out this function here a little bit more. So this is where I'm going to add, I've got to iterate the children in this list here. So what I'm going to do, before I forget, I'm just going to make a note. So you can see here I've got a list of the tasks that I want, or the tests that I wanted to write. And I've just thought of a new one, and it's really good to keep a running sort of list of the tests you want to create. I thought of a new one for an edge case. So write a test that checks that, what was that I want to do? When there is no list, it can be handled. So that's just testing an edge case where the data is going to be malformed. But the markdown file can be anything, right? Like it can have anything in it. So it could easily have something that doesn't conform to our Kanban board. So I do want to keep a track of the kind of ways that you could just type stuff in the markdown file that could break this, because I do want to test my edge cases. I do want to test my error conditions and failure modes. I want to make sure that this thing can basically handle errors gracefully. But what I'm doing here is I think I want to go through, so for list, what am I doing? For const, come on, list item of list root, not children. So I'm iterating over the children at this branch of the abstract syntax tree. I basically want to kind of put all this stuff in here. So I'm doing that multiple times now for each task. And I've got my list item, which is basically what first task is. So I'm just going to leave that as list item. I think that's the best way to represent what that is. I'm still going to hard code this. So I'm still hard coding it to pull out, the first child and the first child. And obviously that's a little bit brittle. and there should be some error checking here to make sure that there are children. But we don't need to do that yet. We don't need to do that to make our tests pass. In fact, I'm just going to make a note to write tests for this later, because I'm probably not going to get a chance in this session today. Write tests to check when required children in the AST are missing. So I want to test that we can handle that situation gracefully. This isn't really the first task test, so I'm going to hit F2. I'm just going to rename this variable. It doesn't make sense anymore. I'm hitting F2 to do a refactor rename. Well, this is a great feature of Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to call this, it's not the first one anymore, so it's just task text. I've just refactored renamed that. You can see that it's renamed it here as well, so it renames it automatically, which is cool. I'm hoping this will get me a passing test. No, something's still not quite right. Oh, this is actually a problem in the test. So I should have actually set this ID to be task 1 and this ID to be task 2. Okay. So I've got all passing tests, and now I should be able to load even more than 2 tasks. I'm not going to test that. I don't think I need to test that, but I've got a generic list iteration here, so I can basically pull out as many cards, as many tasks as I want. So that's really cool. I'm just gonna see where I'm at now. You know what? I think I'm actually ready for a commit. Like, I think I've done a lot of work here, and I've still got work outstanding to commit from the last session. So I'm just going to bring up source tree here. So you can see that it's just, this whole session is just about this one small change, but it's an incremental step forward in the complexity of this function and building up this function to have all the features that it needs. And this function is actually a great demonstration of what test-driven development can do to actually help you, step by step build out something complicated. Because, at no point are we adding a lot of complicated code to this function, but at the end of the day, once I'm finished all this test-driven development, this function is going to be very complicated. But each step that we took to get there, each step was very simple. So I'm just going to stage that. I could do this from the command line. I was doing this from the command line a lot more in previous live streams, but honestly, I do a lot of my checking here. So you can see here that I'm checking the diff. It makes it really easy to check the diff in source tree. And what I'm doing here is I'm like peer reviewing my own code. Like, I'm double checking my code to make sure that I don't spot any new bugs or anything like that. So I'm coding this by myself. It's not me and a team doing this. It's just me by myself. So I don't have anyone else that can peer review. So I'm peer reviewing my own code here, and I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, I could do this from the command line as well. It's just git diff, right? Oh, except I think I've got to unstage. If I'll just unstage these temporarily, just so I can show you that. Git diff. So that shows you the same thing. It's just a little bit harder to read. So I'm going to stage this all. I'm going to write a commit message. So updated the converter function to handle loading of tasks in lanes. Actually, I'll use the proper Kanban board terminology here. Cards in lanes in a Kanban board, or in Kanban board data. So I've committed that. I'm going to push that. So you can actually go to the repo. So that's getting pushed up now. You could actually go to the repo here. Ashley Davis, Taskboard VS Code extension, and you can get that change if you want to run that test for yourself. It's just a git clone and then run npm test, and you can run these tests for yourself. Oh, before you do that, you've got to run npm install. I've done that already, obviously. That will get you dependencies, and then run npm test, and then that will show you these tests. Cool. So I like to, get code to a certain level of completion. So like, I've got a bunch of passing tests here. Originally when I was writing this can loaded test, I'd sort of hacked it a bit, and I sort of unhacked it a little bit with that test there, and then when can load multiple tasks, I finally unhacked it, and I've got sort of generic nice generic code here now. So I'm not committing any hacks, and you know, I'm not necessarily against committing hacks either, but you know, sometimes you do that. But I've got a nice function here that works to the extent that it works. I've got tests that prove that it works. There's nothing in here that feels particularly inelegant or a hack. Oh, I guess we've got this bit here. So there's no, you know, I can't do anything about this yet, but we've got this code here that's, sorry, I've just switched. I'm going to close this file because it's getting in my way. Yeah, so we've got this code here that's, you know, hard coded to pull the first child of the first child, which, you know, obviously that seems a little bit dodgy. That's not going to be eventually part of the code. But it's another test. It's a different test that I'm gonna have to work on to really kind of make this code fully robust. I'm probably not going to do that today, but let's just have a look at where I'm up to. So I've done my CanLoader task with different data. I'm striking that off my list of tests to do. I've got my CanLoad Oh, we're on to some good stuff now. So I do want to do these. Like, I do want to kind of, you know, dot on my I's, cross all my T's, and write tests for error conditions and edge cases. But I'm going to hold off doing that for the moment. I might even do that between live streams. We'll see. What I want to do now is do some fun stuff. So you can see down here I've got a bunch of tasks or tests that I want to write for editing tasks. And that means so that when you edit the Kanban board, we can reapply those changes to the markdown file and save the markdown file. But I want to do that in a way that doesn't lose any data in the markdown file, that doesn't, you know, conform to this to-do list format or this Kanban board format. So that's a little bit tricky. But I figure what I want to do to achieve that is I want to be able to reference a node in the abstract syntax tree. So I need some sort of path that I can use to reference a node. And when a lane gets edited, or when a card gets edited, I want to be able to use that path into the abstract syntax tree to basically be able to go back and do surgery on the abstract syntax tree. And so I don't want to kind of basically completely re-serialize the markdown from the Kanban board data, because that means I'll lose data in the markdown file. So I want to do this surgery on the markdown file just to update it with what's changed, and then be able to, and I'm working on the abstract syntax tree, but I can definitely serialize the abstract syntax tree back to a regular markdown file without losing any data. Now, I like to keep these sessions at 30 minutes, and I'm doing really badly on it if you've watched here my previous sessions. So I do want to wrap up soon, but I'll just give you a taste of where I'm going to go next and how I'm going to tackle this problem, because it's using a really cool library that I haven't had much of a chance to play with this library. It's called Ramda. Like, I've used it once or twice before, and it's quite a big library, and it's got all these functions for doing like functional programming in JavaScript. It's really awesome. Like what I want to use is the path function, and the path function allows you to create a path into a data structure, into a JavaScript data structure, and then use that to kind of drill down into that data structure. And I lost it. Now, here we go. To be able to drill down into that data structure and pull out the element that you're interested in. And what I'm interested in here is to be able to find the lane to edit it, and to find the card that we want to edit as well. Now, Ramda has this cool online bit. It's got this REPL. Hang on, I just lost my documentation. I'm just going to open this in a new tab. So it's got this REPL where you can try Ramda. It's really cool. I do happen to have a example AST dataset that I created earlier in this series. I'm just going to recall that now. I've got it just sitting here. So this is a markdown abstract syntax tree that's been serialized to JSON. So it's a JSON thing. I'm just going to pull that into the Ramda REPL here. It doesn't like it because it doesn't just like JSON just like that. I think I've got to save it as a variable. So I'll call it, let's call it AST. It's an abstract syntax tree. So this is my markdown abstract syntax tree. I've got no errors. Cool. Now I just want to show you what this path can do. So what am I trying to find here? Let's say that I want to edit. I want to edit the text here of this. This is a card. So this is a. You can remember this is a list item. So this is what's under a lane. This is the list of tasks, the list of cards. And I want to be able to get to this and you know, get the object, this object here that contains that. So I need basically a way to kind of reference this node in the abstract syntax tree. And Ramda path gives me a really cool way to do that. But we've got to basically drill down into it. So I'm just going to bring up my handy little notepad here so I can take notes as I work through this. I'll put them side by side. And in fact, I'll just go down to the end here and I'll build out this path to show you what I'm trying to do. So we're looking for a path, a series of fields into here that can allow us to pull out that node that I want to have edited. So the first level is we want to get to the children. Actually, I can actually kind of incrementally try this as well. Is that going to do what I want? Do I have to call that as a function? Something I'm not understanding here about how this works. Oh, I've got to actually pass in the. I've actually got to pass in the ASD. Okay, cool. So that's pulling out the children. Let's make this easy on myself and maybe not go all the way to the end of this file, but so let's keep building this out. So we're going the children, and then we want to get the first child. I wonder if I just use 0 for that. I can't quite remember. I mean, it could be like 0 in square. No, I don't think so. I have used this before, but like only when I was prototyping. So like I don't really know Ramda very well, and I don't really know what I'm doing here. So we're working this out together. So let's say that I get down to the next level, and I'll go down to the children here. So I want to get the children at the next level. And the first element there is this text element. So that's actually the text of a lane. Oh no, sorry, that's the heading of the whole thing. So I don't even want that. I kind of want maybe the next child. Yeah. So no, third child maybe. Let's just try that. Let's just try that and see if it's actually getting... This data is kind of complicated, so it's kind of hard to pick out what you want. That didn't seem to do a lot at all, but maybe it's just because we're getting overwhelmed with the data that's here. This is what I want to find. This is what I want to find. Maybe that's the fourth child. But anyway, to check this, let's drill down to the children of that, and then to the value. And if I'm correct, what this is going to return is to do from this text here. But I could be targeting the wrong child. Undefined. So there's something I've got wrong there. Let's double check this. In fact, let's double check this in Visual Studio, because here, this is much easier to work here actually because I can collapse things. So what am I looking at? So that's the first child. This one here is the second child. So that's index 0, index 1. This is index 2. I don't think that's what I want either. Oh, here it is here. So this is what I want. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So I got child 3. I think that's correct. And then I want to go down to the children of that. Yeah. Oh no, look, there we go. I got that wrong. So maybe that's the ticket. Why does it? What else have I got wrong there? Okay, so we're looking at the children there. You probably seen what the problem is here. I need a 0, so I need to get the first child there. Woohoo! I've pulled out the name of Elaine. Now I can go back one in the path, so I'm going back to the parent of that, which is the abstract syntax tree node, basically that contains that data. I can actually, so I'm prototyping here. This is kind of like what in the next session I'll actually redo this using test-driven development, and I'll actually get this out that way. But for now, let's say that this is the lane, and can I just see what's in the lane? So this is all sort of jumped up with this position start end nonsense, which we don't really care about. And it's sort of going off screen there, so it's really hard to see what. Oh, there we go. So you can see it here. We got the to do there. So I could essentially rewrite the value. I could say value equals blah. Let's look at what's in that lane again. So if I look at that again, you can see that the value's been changed to blah. So this is how I could potentially edit a lane. And I'm doing surgery like on the abstract syntax tree here. I hope if we actually print out the whole thing. So I'll just print out the whole abstract syntax tree. Oh, you can't see it. I really wish they'd format this better. What I'll do is I'll just copy that into a new Visual Studio Code window. Actually, I need a JSON formatter. Where can we quickly find a JSON formatter? So let's convert this to some nice looking JSON. That's all great. Put it back in Visual Studio Code. This is a lot of trouble to go to, but this is a way of prototyping that's going to be a little bit easier than actually just trying to write the code. I'm getting an idea of where I'm going with this, so that when I actually come back to the test-driven development, I can actually make a proper plan about what I'm doing. Save that as test.json. So now I've saved it as a JSON file, I can actually collapse stuff. So what I'm looking here for is the third child. You can see that I've got this whole data structure, and all I did was rewire blah. So essentially what I've done here is I could change the name of a lane, I could change the name of a card, or edit other things, and all I'm doing is I'm going back into the abstract syntax tree and just rewiring or just rewriting only the thing that I need to change. And I'm not risking losing any of this other data here that may not fit the Kanban board format. So at the end of the day, I'm going to an extra level of complexity here, but it's kind of necessary because I don't want to lose user data. That would be horrible if we lost that data while someone was using this. If we lost text from their markdown file. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that today. Hope you've learned something. Hope you've enjoyed watching the progress of the development. I'm going to be back at the same time next Friday, doing this same live stream, continuing this live stream. We'll be continuing our testing. I might do between live streams now. This has been pretty much real time so far. But between live streams now, I might start doing some of the boring stuff, like some of the stuff that we've already covered before that you don't really necessarily need to see again. So at the start of next session next week, I will give you a bit of a rundown of what I've done, what I've changed in the meantime. So stay tuned to my Twitter account as well, because I might be doing a couple of special live streams mid next week, and I'll announce those on Twitter when they're ready to be announced. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you again in a week. Bye-bye.